Welcome to the Emotional Balance Sheet, the go-to podcast for parents with multiple kids, especially those with twins, triplets, or more, who are navigating the maze of modern family life and personal finance. Whether you're overwhelmed by education or retirement planning, parenting dilemmas, career transitions, or trying to define your purpose and plan, we're here to guide you with empathy, encouragement, and expertise. Hosted by Paul Fenner, founder of Tama Capital, a certified financial planner and parent to 4 kids, including a set of triplets. Our podcast is your ally in the quest for financial peace of mind, proving that money matters, but family comes first. Subscribe now and join our community of empowered parents at tamacapital.com. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for investment decisions. Clients of Tama may retain positions in the securities discussed in this podcast.
What does comprehensive financial planning even mean? At Tama Capital, it means a family office where lifestyle planning such as retirement, college, portfolio management, and tax prep and planning are all under one umbrella. But it goes beyond numbers. We focus as much on the emotional side of financial planning as we do on the financial side. We get you. We understand your challenges of building a family, business or career, and a healthy life. We are devoted to wealth planning for families like yours because we are you. Learn how our family can help your family by visiting tamacapital.com. Have you ever wondered what it's like when 2 financial advisors get together? That may sound like a bad joke, but that's what this conversation today is with Matt Zeigler. Matt, I met through the Shaping Wealth community, which is a community of advisors that are focused on the behavioral side of financial planning. And it was an interesting conversation, one that was very different than I've ever probably hosted here on the podcast over the last 4 years. We didn't have an agenda at all. I just wanted to record a typical conversation that I usually have with Matt once or twice a quarter and share that with everyone. And we get into some inside baseball topics around what an advisor does, value, things of that nature that are really interesting. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation with Matt Zeigler. Don't you just love the countdown, Matt Zeigler, on the recording platform that we use, Riverside? It counts us down like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It's like silent, 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 and then, hey, everybody, we're here.
It's a great feeling, and I try not to remind myself of the Challenger rocket disaster every time it counts down, but I know we're going to be okay.
Well, I believe you probably follow the Ritholtz guys over at the Compound and Friends. I've thought about doing something different like they do. Like they have this whole conversation going, and then sometimes they forget to start the show, and then they have all their fancy producers, Nicole and John or whatever, come in and do their clicks, and away they go. Because sometimes, like when we're just talking, I'm like, well, wait a minute, let me just hit record, because if I just start talking to you, I'll start like asking you questions or talking about things. And then it's like, oh, we should have had that on tape. And so now I don't know if you're a Mark Maron fan at all. I always love in Mark Maron episodes where they're a chunk of the way into it and the guest is like, should we start recording? And he's like, oh, no, it's been going for like 14 minutes. Like, you're good. That's the way I think back in my first year of having the podcast, there was a time where I forgot to hit record. This is like back in like feeling. Using Zoom. And it was terrible. It was terrible. So I should have told you beforehand. Like I'll do like a pre-recorded. I'm letting the audience know on the secret sauce. Like I'll let people know who you are. But today, ladies and gentlemen, we have the privilege of having Matt Zeigler on the show. And we're doing something, or I'm doing something, I should say, that I've never done before. Like Matt just agreed to be on. And the reason he agreed to be on is Matt and I are friends. We're in the financial planning community. We met each other through a program called Building the Behavioral Advisor with Brian Portnoy, who I've had on before. If you look behind my shoulder, his book's sitting up there, The Geometry of Wealth. Brian is a tremendous guy and a tremendous networker, and he brings people like Matt and I together. But the real reason why you're on is because of Madison. And the audience may recall that name. Madison is my girl triplet. And if you ever meet Madison, she will tell you that she's the oldest by 60 seconds. So she rules over her identical twin and triplet brothers, and to some degree, her +1 sister. But I was watching an episode of your show. I don't know. You have so many shows. Cultish Creation. You've got, I had to even pull it up, like the shows that you have. Epsilon Theory, Excess Returns, which probably, if people listening to this will probably know of more. But you had Dr. Preston Cherry on, and Madison started watching that. And she's like, who are those two people, Dad? I'm like, well, I actually know both. Matt and I are becoming friends. I think we could probably say we're friends now.
You count it. And lock it in.
What's that?
Lock it in. Count it.
And Preston Cherry, Dr. Preston Cherry, was our keynote speaker at the XY conference this past year up in Minneapolis. And so Madison sat down and basically watched that whole like hour and a half conversation with the two of you. She's like, Dad, you got to have Matt.
She's suffering through all my Stevie Wonder references.
I don't think she really got those.
Probably always.
Yeah. But she's really intuitive about like the industry. She probably knows more about the finance industry than most 14-year-olds. And the thing I love about, I love all my kids, so I don't have favorites. Just to clarify, in case you're listening, Teresa, she is really curious about like what I do, how I work with people, the families, like who's a family office family, who's a business type family. And she knows a lot about 401k plans. And so I think her biggest struggle as she gets into high school and figures out what she wants to do in college is this debate going on in her head between being an aerospace engineer and potentially taking over the family business one day.
I mean, why not do both? Don't stop there.
She's a very ambitious girl, so we'll see. And you, as you and I both know, we need way more women in the financial planning industry today anyways. So the one thing I really wanted to talk to you about, because you work with families and clients on financial planning as well, and I feel like the one thing I just keep talking about over and over and over is keeping the noise out. Like with the politics and the markets and what Trump is doing today, what he did yesterday, what Congress is doing. And I was having this conversation with my support person, my chief of staff, as I call her, Kelly, yesterday. And she likened it to, a lot of people being 4-year-olds or 5-year-olds where we get mad and then we say, oh, I'm taking my ball and going home. Because it's like, it's not, you may not like a person, but that doesn't mean like you don't like some of their policies or vice versa. And it feels like there's no room for anybody to have an opinion like that because you just get pigeonholed. Well, if you like Trump, then you're a racist, or if you don't like him, you're this. And it's like, it's so polarizing. And people are asking me more and more about it. Like, well, what are you doing with the portfolio? Like, how is this impacting your decisions on that? And as much as I've tried to communicate with families I work with that I do everything possible to keep politics out of the portfolio, I think it's just because it's in our face constantly every day. It's hard to escape that people are like really having a hard time like letting go and turning out the noise.
So one of the big things that I talk about a lot, and I kind of see these as almost the pillars, keystones, whatever the right metaphor is, when I think about all the different stuff that I do, both personally and professionally with Sunpoint as a financial planner and all the leadership stuff that I do there is, and it shows up in what you're saying, we feel disconnected, we feel uninformed, and we feel calloused to this world around us. And when we work with families, when we talk to people, when we try to help them with what they're going to do with a world that feels disconnected, uninformed, and just calloused, where you just want to crawl into a shell and ignore everything that's there, is how do I move people from being disconnected to connected? How do I move people from feeling uninformed to informed? How do I move people from feeling calloused to feeling curious about what's going on around them? And constantly across everything I'm doing, I'm trying to just work people out of that shell, not to give them an answer, but to get them to flip this switch from what I think of as creator mode versus consumer mode. So I have this idea. I call it the creator flywheel, but you can flip it to the consumer flywheel. I'll explain how it works in a second. This idea that we all have this external stuff that comes in. You can call it the muse. You can call it where like creative thoughts or interesting things come from. But bottom line, outside of your brain, there's this space where stuff comes in. Curiosity is the first step where we as individuals notice, and we have the agency of noticing, oh, that's interesting. That headline, hey, look what the president did today. Isn't that wild? Whatever it is, it comes into our brain. That is our curiosity getting triggered. That is a critical first step to be aware of what is piquing our curiosity and why. Because the second thing that happens is we now have the question that we have to answer after our curiosity has been piqued. Am I consuming this thing that the muse delivered to my curiosity, or am I doing something with it? Am I going to create something with it? And that little step is how we move from disconnected to connected. It's how we moved from feeling uninformed to like, I learned something, I'm informed. It's how we move from feeling calloused and closed off from the world to being curious about or creative about what I'm going to do with it. And that little step of moving from creator mode to consumer mode, or flipping back and forth and going, if there's something I want to do with it, that informs the last step of my flywheel, which is the habit. And that's this habit of like, what proactive steps am I going to make? So now to bring it all the way back to what you said, when clients are coming and they're like, I can't keep up with this giant onslaught of news. It just makes me want to curl up in a cage. I'm going to go with them. Great. What do we want to feel like we're doing about it? What are the emotional triggers that this is hitting us with? And how can we start looking at what part of those are making us feel the ways we're feeling so we can take a proactive step forward? And it shows up in other ways. Sometimes I hear people and they're saying something about the portfolio, but they're really feeling is like, I don't really know I don't feel good about the world my kids are graduating from college coming into, or I don't feel good about my prospects for my job or work, or I don't feel good about all these things. And usually I'm trying to get to that underlying thing beyond the portfolio adjustment. Sometimes portfolio adjustments warranted too, but a lot of times right now when the information is coming so fast and furious, it's just, let's have a conversation about how to not just passively consume this news. Let's figure out something that we can create productively into our lives, into the world, and make a difference with it.
One of the things that I keep coming up with, and I could probably go back to 4 or 5 years ago when one of the first times I actually met Brian, or I guess virtually, is this concept of really knowing what your purpose and objectives are. And when I'm putting together like this blueprint, this 1-page plan for the families I work with, that's really where it starts. I think, as you probably have well experienced in your career in the financial service space, like, people have this stereotype about us. And I should say, I'm pretty sure you're the first other financial planner that I've had on the podcast in like 4 years. And I'm a part of XY, which is a huge community of like-minded advisors. Like, we just had our town hall. There's over 2,000 advisors in
Amazing.
XY now.
That's amazing.
Which is amazing what Kitsis and Alan Moore had started, because Alan was saying 10 years ago when they started the network, if you will, they were hoping that they'd have 200 people, and now they have 2,000. But not every advisor is different. Like, we all have, well, I shouldn't say we all have, but I think the really good ones, and I think we fall into that camp, have our own niche of people that we work with. And so some people may be working with doctors or attorneys or people that work at Chick-fil-A. I know there's a Kids episode that has an advisor that works in Atlanta with just people that work at Chick-fil-A. And that's his whole business. And my point with this is that people have to find the right advisor for them. Like, you could be a great fit for somebody and I might not, or vice versa. So I think what's interesting, and going back to, I think the point I was going to make, is when people take the time to really understand their purpose and objectives, that North Star, I think that is like a beacon that helps like automatically turn out the noise. Like it's like a force field. The noise can keep coming, but as long as you know, I'm thinking like, because I know you're into science fiction too, like a Star Wars, like a force field, and it just that noise would just bounce off of it if that is like rock solid. And it's the same thing like when it comes to the portfolio management side of what we do. Like if we know like what that is, then it's much easier. We're not being reactive. We're always being proactive. Because some of the best moves I've ever made as the portfolio manager role of what I do is doing absolutely nothing.
By far the most valuable ones. What's the old Jesse Livermore quote? I made most of my money not by my like running around. I made most of my money when I was sitting. Like it's just, even a trader will tell you that you make the money when you're not chasing. I think it's worth saying too, and not to make, I'm not going to turn this into like a weird Star Wars, Star Trek thing, but it's not just North Star, but it's North Stars. It's the galaxy far, far away. It's whatever you want to turn it into. It's not the Wrath of Khan probably, but you know where I'm going. Like I always talk with clients, and same, you guys have your blueprint. We call it our family playbook that we come up with at some point. And the whole premise there is this is a document where we want to capture the context so that when whatever life throws at us next or whatever markets throw at us next, we have a written piece of context that we can go back to make sure we work through everything. And we're not reacting to the wrong thing that only matters for a teeny tiny piece of the puzzle. Because there's no such thing, at least in our world, we're not just portfolio managers and we're not just exclusively financial planners. We're bridging that gap. There's no such thing as an investment that doesn't actually have a reason for being there. And there's no reason for like doing something that doesn't have an investment on the other side. And I'll take it as far as connect back to the point I was saying earlier. When we unpack this stuff and we go through just these feelings and emotions we want to trigger in people as we move them forward on this progression, we're also looking for these anchor points. And ours is squared around what we call, who are the people, who are the players that we're doing this for, the people you're financially and maybe emotionally responsible for in some way. It's basically the beginning of every deck for us when we put it together. Who are the people and how are they related? Because let's face it, somebody has like the sibling or the extended family member they take care of too. And we want to capture that whole family tree up and down the trunk, out on the branches, wherever it goes. But then it's this idea of capturing a timeline. We call it the calendar, capturing the cash flow statement, the money that's going in and money that's going out, and then the balance sheet. Because the cash flow statement changes over time and you have surpluses or deficits, and that determines what ends up on the balance sheet in, assets you've accumulated through a surplus or things you owe via a deficit, and how that all squares out. Inside of that, we can also map that across all sorts of values too, because the parents' values that need to get passed on to the kids or to the business partners or whatever the ordeal is, like those values, the decisions to accumulate deficits and surpluses and then what you do with them, those are the values that are going to show up in the rest of life too. And those become the set of North Stars where you're not just trying to pass financial values forward, you're trying to pass personal values forward. And if you have something that works, you want to pass on what works forward. You don't want to pass on the bad stuff or the mistakes or like the heartache and the regrets. You want to pass on the stuff that goes, yeah, life is hard, but here's how we roll with it. And that takes having a system, having context, and having, orientation to that star map above your head. I know you do it too, because I've seen the work that you do.
So what was your driving factor of being part of Portnoy's building a behavior advisor group? I'll tell you mine, but I'll let you go first.
My main driving factor was I can't remember when the initial cohort was, but I wanted to participate then just out of curiosity for what he was putting together. And it took me a little while to get there. I forget what cohort we were a part of, but I missed the initial one. And I was like, I definitely want to do this.
I think we were 4.
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
We weren't 1 or 2. I know at least that.
Yeah.
But we were sub 10. I don't think they're at 10 yet. The main driver was I saw the team come together around the idea. So seeing Portnoy, seeing Joy Leary joining, seeing Meg Lertz joining. And I went, okay, I actually know there's things I've already learned from all these people, and there's more I could learn from these people if they're aggregated in one spot. Plus, if there's a bunch of advisors who are also trying to learn from these people at the same time, this is a great way to do it. My firm at Sunpoint, the whole firm was founded on behavioral finance stuff. So anybody who's got their CFA, or even if you've studied for your CFP stuff, high odds, because it's in the curriculum, like CFA level 3, when you're studying that stuff and you get to the behavioral finance chapter, that's my partner, Michael Pompian, the founder of our company. So it's like, we're really steeped on this stuff, especially on the investment side, especially as the legacy investment consulting for family offices business. That's what Sunpoint was founded on. The challenge in my friendship with Michael Pompian over the years formed on how do we take that stuff, but now turn it into the conversations we would have behind the scenes. He's like, what do I do with these kids? What do I do with, we just won this business for this pension asset. They want us to run some programs for the people. How do I put a wellness program together? And this is all the stuff I was doing in the track that I was on with Bank of America Merrill Lynch. So when I left there and joined, it was, how do we connect this together? In swoops Brian Portnoy and this,
all-star team,
Avengers Unite, whatever, gathered up team, Voltron something. And I went, here's all the people I want to learn from in one place a lot of it, and I'm sure you feel the same, a lot of it you intuitively sense, but having somebody walk you through it and give you the labels, I was like, I need the labels so I'm not just the wacko on the street corner with my intuitions and explaining stuff in the weird ways I explain stuff. Let me hang out with these people and have a reason to practice this into my language so I can bring it back to the company. What was your reason? Very curious.
So you're part of an ensemble team. Like, you have a team, like, at some point. And as most people hopefully know by now, like, I'm a solo advisor. I have Kelly, who's I call her my chief of staff, my part-time support person. But when I came into this industry, I came in from my corporate career. Like, I didn't grow up in the financial service industry. Like, I had spent 20 plus years in corporate accounting, operations, finance, engineering roles across multiple different industries and companies and spectrums. So I came in at a very different angle. But when I'm a very outgoing person, as most people know as they get to know me. I would be more of an extrovert, not an introvert. And so coming into having your own firm and just you, it's like, I'm in my office, I'm just looking around, I'm just surrounded by walls. I'm like, where are the people at? And so that's ultimately what drove me to finally join the XY community, and then to find communities like Shaping Wealth and what Brian and team were building. I think that the group that we were a part of, that was Megan Lertz's first group, which was pretty special. But I knew that I knew, like you just said, like, I knew the content around behavioral finance. I've been studying it for a while, been incorporating it in the work that I do with the families at TAMA. But what I really wanted was that community. And that community never stops delivering, whether it's the Shaping Wealth group or like they're people that I meet with every 6 weeks, other advisors through XY. And I think that's what I find is always special. And I knew that I didn't know the extent of the community that I was going to be a part of or get myself into at Shaping Wealth, but I'm so glad that I did, because I've met people like you, Joy Leary, who I've had on the show. And for those listening, Joy is our resident therapist at Shaping Wealth. Basically, she holds office hours once a month for advisors like myself and Matt to go in a safe space, if you will, to have conversations about things that either we're struggling with personally being advisors, or cases that other advisors are bringing that we can help with. So it's just an amazing community of people that, again, are trying to support each other and not like bring each other down.
One of this idea that I was talking about before about like helping people move from feeling disconnected to feeling connected, from uninformed to informed to callous to curious. When I say these things, I see all of them on a continuum. And I say them, and I think it's important for me personally just to put these labels on them, because when I see them as a continuum, it also helps me figure out where I am on that line. And with that program specifically, it was something where I didn't necessarily feel disconnected from the field or the knowledge base of it, but I did feel like in both the connection and the informed side, it's like, well, I'm center at best on each of those continuum. How do I just find a few more advisors? And I met some really remarkable other advisors, you included, on that journey where it's like, okay, now I feel a little bit more connected to people who think this way. I am very much aware of the groundswell in our industry towards moving towards this stuff. So it's great. I want to stay ahead of that curve. So that's the other thing here. You and I are looking at this going, we're not retiring tomorrow. We have to stay ahead of this curve if this is the adoption. How do we put ourselves on that vanguard? How do we find other people who are doing it? And how do we know just a little bit more? Partly so at cocktail parties, you can throw around the trans-theoretical model of change.
Good old Meg.
Good old Meg. But also, so you can start to internalize that stuff, wrap it into your practice. And when somebody else is trying to market themselves with the buzzwordiness of, behavioral finance stuff, behavioral finance, like, yeah, great. I can have a human conversation with somebody though, and walk them through stuff and just go like, oh, okay. I don't have to say out loud, you're in the pre-commitment phase, but I go like, okay, you're still grappling with stuff. Let me just provide you a context, back off, give you some space, make you feel like a human's talking to you, and know that then I can go, call up my buddy Paul here and commiserate on the phone about, why some
That's
prospect some business owners drive me crazy. Yeah.
Just you saying trans-theoretical model like brings back, I still don't have my arms wrapped around that, but Megan Lert's trans model there.
The Trans-Siberian Orchestra. That's right.
Right. That's it. And that's the thing is like the other thing I struggle with is when I meet new people or people ask like what I do, it's like always like, I really I think I struggle more with it the last few years than I had like earlier on, because it's just.
So what's the elevator pitch? Like, what do you say?
Well,
I meet you.
What's that?
If I meet you in the wild, what does Paul Fenner say to me when I'm like, Mr. Fenner, you seem like an interesting guy. What do you do? What do you do for work? You have a good answer to that question?
I don't know if that's the thing. I feel like I'm supposed to by this point in the game, but I still feel like I don't, because it's ever evolving. It's constantly changing. And I think by like going through like the program at Shaping Wealth, that adds to it, because to sit down with a family for the first time and try to explain to them all the things that you're going to be able to help them with if they ever get into a life transition or situation where, somebody passes away, like what do you do? Things like that. Somebody actually was just telling me the other day about the way that you should explain it, Paul, is that you're a human security blanket in people's times of life transition.
Are you the weighted kind? Are you plug-in? Are you electric? What kind of security blanket?
Yeah.
Linus blanket floating over the piano?
Madison has got one of these weighted blankets for Christmas. I'm like, it's pretty nice.
Okay. Paul Fenner, weighted security blanket for your
weighted
finances.
Security blanket.
Right.
But I thought about that. I'm like, that's probably one of the better analogies that I've heard, because I think there's still this stereotype that when you say financial advisor, they're like, oh, that's the person that picks my portfolio and stocks and bonds and mutual funds, ETFs, whatever that may be. But that's really like, I always tell people, well, that's an important piece of what I do. It's not the most important piece. The most important piece is always trying to get somebody to understand their purpose and objectives. And then how do we start bringing in what we call comprehensive planning, which again is still like kind of a misnomer. Well, what the heck does that mean? It's all these disparate pieces of your life that I try to be the centerpiece of, the quarterback or the point guard, if you will, depending on your sport, or the center in hockey, of being that sturdy tree, if you will. And I don't think it's on accident that Camille Jane, when she was helping me launch my firm and coming up with my name, Tama, the symbol that they designed was this a form of a tree with these four roots on it, which each represented one of my kids. And so that's where I try to strive to be, is like this partner centerpiece. Some people will call it like personal CFO in our industry, but being that person that when something goes bump in the night, you had the relationship built, and that comfort level is just there, that they're just picking up the phone and calling you. And I don't know how you put a value on that. Somebody was asking me that the other day, and like I can't help you with that. Like I can't tell you like what the value of peace of mind is. Like, is that $1 million? Is it $2 million? Is it $500,000? I don't know, because I feel like at some points people are, and rightly so, will ask the question, okay, am I getting the value out of working with an advisor, whether that's Matt Zeigler or Paul Fenner? And there's some things that are quantifiable about what we do, but I think that the biggest pieces of what we do aren't quantifiable. It's that there's a book about this, Selling the Invisible, and it's kind of what we do, because when your life hits the fan, like, I'm there, and you're there as well for the families that you work with.
Yeah, I think there's a number of levels in that are tricky to unpack. And on the last one first, like, I think about people we work with in the marketing industry and, friends in that industry too, where it's like, what's the ROI of that? What was the average? Did you see the 30-second cost for the Super Bowl this last weekend?
$8 million.
$8 million for 30 seconds. Okay. Yep. So $8 million for 30 seconds. How do you measure the ROI of that ad campaign? Welcome to financial services. How do you measure the ROI? And
I should just interrupt you. Full disclosure, Teresa is in the field of marketing. So her and I have these conversations all the time, because I absolutely hate marketing.
I'm fascinated. Teresa, our apologies. Madden, you're my favorite of the children. Just let's get that out there too. The idea with marketing is like, marketing is basically you are using a story to create the perception of some type of value that person delivering that value then has to follow through on why that's not a lie, why it's not a fabrication. Marketing can be used to just falsely inflate the idea of a value, and then it can pop and fall flat on its face. But it can also be used to say, here's the story, here's why this exists. And then you can step into that and go like, oh, this really is the experience that I was looking for. It gets really tricky when you want to force quantitative measures over it, because then, maybe the most important, like, everybody should read, a marketing book. And you could start really easy with like a Seth Godin, This is Marketing. Great place to start. Or go really deep, like read some of like the Jack Trout stuff. Read, any of the Ogilvy stuff. Love the Ogilvy stuff. Love looking at advertising through different mediums. Woo, the book that he wrote about the history of advertising and how it works is phenomenal. I'm blanking on the Attention Merchants. That book's one of my favorites. This idea of it evolves over time and in different domains. So for us, because we're providing an intangible service, we just have to be good at talking about it. Now I'm curious with this too. Did you read, are you a Fourth Turning guy? You ever read that book? Familiar with that book?
No.
The Fourth Turning, my favorite stat about this book, and like when I pitch it to people, this is the only book that, 20 years ago now at this point, Steve Bannon, Steve Bannon, the crazy. Oh, yeah. Sorry if that loses you any subscribers. The guy's crazy. So Steve Bannon and Al Gore, former Vice President Al Gore, this is the only book that the both of them passed out to Congress, like when they were like, part of the presidential team.
That's interesting.
Yeah, weird, right? Like those two personalities both are like, everybody should read this book. And when two people from those different walks of life think this is a great book, that's an interesting thing. So the Fourth Turning usually gets painted as this weird doomerism view of, it's basically this guy, Neil Howe, writes this book with his partner in the 90s. It's where the word millennial comes from. The Fourth Turning.
Okay.
So it's this idea of what's called generational theory, or that's what they call it. And it's not woo, but it's not science, because it's a social science thing. Really convenient in explaining the past, maybe not quite so convenient in predicting the future, but I've found the framework incredibly useful for understanding stuff. And I'll tell you how. This is my plug for you specifically, just to read this book. And the new one, The Fourth Turning is Here. Exceptional. So in The Fourth Turning is Here, and what in all the writing on this, it basically says how at any point in time, there's basically 4 generations of people on Earth or in a country. And we'll focus on country because it's a little bit easier.
Okay.
And basically it's like separate it by about 20 years, but you have people who have a roughly a little bit common experience in these like 20-year chunks. And this period of 20 years of life, they get to 20 something and then they start having kids and then the next ones have kids and it rolls over. And in about an 80-year cycle, you've rolled over basically the entire demography of the planet or a country or whatever else. And what that says is that you have different groups and tropes that develop in between these 4 generations that are around at any one point in time. And that means like if I'm a 40 something talking to an 80-year-old, I'm going to relate to them differently than the way I'm going to talk to a 60-year-old and certainly differently than I'm going to talk to a 20-year-old. That
makes sense.
Very intuitive, very obvious little insight is something that when I'm trying to explain value, I literally look through that fourth turning lens at explaining the value. So if I'm going to explain, probably not to an 80-year-old, but even like a 70-year-old, and this is only because I just came from having my annual physical at the doctor before this, I'm probably going to say to the 70-year-old, I'm kind of like your general practitioner. I don't do all this stuff. I can't do heart surgery. I can't do brain surgery. I can't even tell you if you have cancer necessarily, but I can order the blood work. I can contact the specialists. I can deal with the medical billing. I've got an assistant. I've got this, whatever else. And I'm probably going to frame it to them as, if you want to understand what I do, think about what your GP does for you. And also think about how easy is it to call that person? How is it to call their team interface with them? I want to make this easy for you. Another little thing before I dive in, I think you've heard me say this before. I hate the term white glove service. I have like an allergic reaction to white glove service. I call everything we do garden glove service. Looks like you're
breaking out in hives already.
I am. I call everything, I refuse to be your butler. Just refuse. Will not bring you orange juice on a tray with my white gloves on. Garden glove service all the way down, which is basically, I'm here to grow something with you. So if you want me to get my hands dirty in the name of growing something with you, I'm all in, but you got to be acceptable that there are no white gloves here. It's just pure garden gloves. So like the 70-year-old, I'm probably going to use a GP analogy and say like, you know how that works? That's a lot like me. If we jump down to like closer to like our generation, I'm also big on this. I always tell kids this when I'm giving kids advice. I'm like, who do you work for at the job? This is like to the 20-year-old. When your kids go to college, I'll have this talk with them. Say, all right, tell me about your boss. They'll be like, I don't know, this is how old is he or she? And they'll tell me how old they are. And I'll be like, all right, we're going to go to IMDb. We're going to figure out what TVs and shows and movies they watch when they're kids. We're going to look at the Billboard charts. We're going to find the music. And here's like 5 analogies to stuff in your pocket or put on your phone and take to work the next day. So if you're like a 45-year-old and I'm talking to you about work and you're like, what do you do? Like, you ever see Pulp Fiction? You've seen Pulp Fiction, right, Paul? Pulp Fiction guy?
Yeah.
Never seen it? Vaguely familiar?
Just the clips, like the,
Culture, my boy. Culture. We're going to get you culture. I know. There's this great character. It's called the Wolf. When the whole thing gets messed up in the middle and they've accidentally killed the person in the backseat of the car and they're driving down whatever boulevard in LA and they're like, we got to get off the road. And like, what do we do? And they call the boss and the boss is like, go to this house. I'm calling the Wolf. And they're like, the Wolf? And then the Wolf shows up and fixes everything. He hoses them off. He brings them clothes. He gets all the stuff. They even have some coffee. There's some regrettable language in the scene. But bottom line is like the Wolf is the fixer. He comes in and solves the problems. And if you're, basically between like 35 and 55, if I say the Wolf from Wall Street, and if you don't know it, maybe you're not my person. I'll send you to go work with Paul. But if you get that metaphor, you're like, I never thought of it that way. I want a wolf in my life. And then likewise, I don't know if I go downstream. So if I'm talking to like, a 25-year-old who made a ton of money in like crypto or something like that, I'm probably going to like break it down. Like, I don't know. I got to find out what like Mr. Beast's right-hand man is or something.
Yeah. But kids love them.
You want to talk about it on those terms. So like for the person who's younger, and this is me showing, I don't think I've brought any 25-year-old clients, definitely lots of kids of those people, but I want to talk about the things that resonate with them. So I might explain to them, it's like, okay, like, it's just Stranger Things. Like that person over there in that office, that's 11. This person over there is this character. And like, we're a team that gathers around you to, fight these problems in the upside down with you.
I have to interrupt you because you brought up Stranger Things. One of the really cool things is one of my clients, one of my families. He's a lead cameraman on Stranger Things. My daughters went nuts. Like Mackenzie, my plus one, who's like really into it. Mr. Andy sent Mac a Stranger Things hat from the set as a Christmas gift this year. And that was like by far like the best gift she had ever gotten. It was so cool.
Yeah. So like
just to watch her face, that was priceless.
Watch her light up. Yeah. So like maybe Hopper, what's the cop? What's the patriarchal cop character? Yeah. So like maybe I'm Hopper and I've got the team of like the people around me who work with me. But the point is, instead of intangible value being a threat to people in our seat, I think it's actually, you just have to lean into it and you want to figure out what other stories do you want to cop to say like, here's another example of it. Okay, how much is Hopper worth as like the patriarchal character in Stranger Things? How much is the wolf? What was the cut that Marcellus Wallace gave to the wolf for like cleaning up the murder scene inside of Pulp Fiction? Like what's the value of your GP? Like, do you want to go back through the medical receipts and let's figure out what your insurance company paid him? Like, these are things where, not to belittle the idea that there's a cost, but it's just, do you really want to assign like a hard dollar value to this thing? And I think it's actually a superpower to not define it and push it into really these other ways we understand these stories.
So we could keep going for a while, but I'm looking at the clock. I'm like, I've got to get to a few things on you personally. Like, you are talking about culture. Like, you are really into culture, like music,
stories, man. It's stories. It's all stories,
books, and like. So, talk to the audience about how you created Cultish Creative, your YouTube channel, because it's really interesting, and we've talked about this before, and you've given me great advice on how to spruce up our YouTube channel over here at Tama, which we're adding people, so that's great. I think we have more people like listening and watching, Kelly thinks, than people actually are listening on Spotify or Apple or whatever, the podcast, which is really fascinating. So talk to like what is Cultish Creative? Like, how did you get into it? And I'm gonna hold you. There's a question I wrote down about an article you wrote that I want to ask you about.
Okay, so you want me to just answer that first, or is the question first?
No, I did a bad job, because that's the one rule of interviewing. Don't ask two questions at the same time.
Well, that's okay. We'll separate them. I'll remind you that you wanted to ask a question.
I've got it.
All right, so this is the lightning round version of, so call it 10 years ago, a little bit more. The iPhone becomes a new thing, and I discover the Notes app. I'm already listening to podcasts from before that, but like on an iPod, when you would have to like plug it in and transfer the stuff over, and I'm listening to like, WTF and Econ Talk and a bunch of NPR music shows, and I was all excited. I was like, oh, I can listen to, a Black Keys concert at the 930 Club in like DC from 2008 or whatever. And it's like doing stuff like that. So I'm doing this and I'm realizing I'm taking in all this information, but then when I go to talk to my friends about it, or I go to relate it to a client at work or something, I'm sure you've experienced this, you open your mouth and you're just like, bleh, and they're like, what? You're like, bleh. They're like, what does that mean? And I'm like, I'm consuming so much stuff in these little gaps and whatever else, or on the commute, but how can I bring it home, bring it to a point? And so I started this, making notes in my phone of stuff I would listen to or whatever else. And I started to just say, can I just have like a complete thought? I just want a complete thought about this thing that I consumed that made me feel a certain way. And so I started to do this. And after doing it for a few years, I realized now 7 years ago, I was like, I should catalog these somewhere on the internet. And so I started putting them online deliberately on an unfindable place that I never talked about or shared with anybody. And I was just like, I'm going to have a complete thought once a day. And for 7 years, I've had a complete thought once a day that I've shared on the internet via this site that became Cultish Creative. About 2.5 years ago, I turned it on and put my name on it finally, because I didn't have a weird compliance department staring over my shoulder going like, surely you must be suggesting like weird penny stocks or something. What the hell do you think I'm doing? I'm talking about punk rock bands from the 80s. But anyway, this idea of how to have a complete thought. Now I call it my personal archive, which is I have not built something that's designed to be a newsletter or to give you 3 life hacks to make your life better. It's literally just my catalog of my complete thoughts. So Cultish Creative, the website, cultishcreative.com. Come say hi. You can search it. I search it all the time. Is literally my database of 7 years of daily completed thoughts about whatever I watched, whatever I listened to, whatever book I read, whatever thing I heard that I was like, oh, I might want to remember this later. And I want to remember it not in a quote or a snippet or something that's just scatterbrained, my actual thought and reflection on that. So that's the website. I realized a couple of years ago when I left Mother Merrill and I could be, exposed to the world. I went to some friends of mine, the excess returns guys, Jack and Justin, got to be friends with them. It was like, as soon as I leave, you need to teach me how to do all this podcast stuff you're doing. And they were like, how about instead of we teach you, how about we put you to work and you join and help us grow the channel and then you can learn while you're doing. And I said, great, because I already really loved what they were doing. It was really fun. And somehow, some way, we took it from like 5,000 subscribers a couple of years ago, literally to like 27,000 subscribers today. We had over 1 million views on the channel last year. And it's crazy when you know what the niche is and what you're doing, what you can grow. That being said, I was like, now that I've learned how to do this about 10-ish months ago, I started some other stuff, specifically on the Cultish Creative channel, which YouTube at Cultish Creative, you'll find all this stuff where
we'll put those links in the show notes.
Beautiful. I would love that. So on Cultish Creative, just like I have these ideas, and it's me as the wolf in Pulp Fiction again. Like I'm running around behind the scenes for clients, meeting people all the time. So that when somebody has a question and they're wondering about their kids in sports, I'm like, oh, I got this athlete person. You need to talk to them. They'll help you figure out that thing, try to get this through your kid's head that they're not going to be pro or they are going to be pro. Who do they talk to about how they pick a manager before this next thing? And I don't know, I look at it like center of influences, but not just the boring ones. Like we all know an accountant, an attorney, and some people like that.
Yeah.
Let's go find the interesting people. And so the Cultish Creative YouTube page is really my hub for going all the stuff I do with ideas. Why not start press and record on it? The Just Press Record show. Here's me doing it with the other people. I'll capture the stuff. My favorite thing I do is the Just Press Record show. And that's the one where I take two people who have never met and I introduce them on the spot.
It's so freaking awesome.
Press record and I host the conversation. I tell them before, I'm like, it's Barstool style. This is Johnny Carson inviting you to stick around on the couch. I don't let the guests know anymore who the other guest is. So they have no idea until they hop into the recording.
Oh, it's totally blind now. You changed that.
It's totally blind as of the last probably 6 or so episodes. Like they get 2 separate calendar invites and everything. I vet out that I'm 90% confident they don't know each other. And then they meet on the spot. And I'm just like, you just have to trust me that I'm going to make this a good time for it. And the best part about that is I get so many notes and thoughts out of doing this from just hanging out with like people that I usually know already separately, but now I'm introducing them to another cool friend. And it's like, again, it's an endless source of ideas.
Yeah.
And now I turn around and it becomes more thoughts for the archive, the personal archive. And it's more stuff that then when I'm sitting down with a client and like this one that just came out this week with Chris Abdelmasia, former Susquehanna options trader, Morgan Randstrom, who I believe runs an RIA. And like they talked about just how none of their kids will ever understand the finance stuff that they do. So they both play music. And they're like, because my kid knows when I get on stage and they see people clapping for me that like dad is cool, somebody else thinks so. And they're like, we just want our kids to see us switched on doing some activity in life, not just making money or pursuing something. It's like, oh my God, I'll say that to 100 clients in the next year, like repeatedly. Oh my God. All because I took an hour to just hang out with them and we recorded it. So now if anybody wants to see it, you can come watch. So that's all the website and YouTube stuff in a nutshell. Collecting stories.
The audience press record on Matt's YouTube channel is totally worth it. Like, because the ones I've watched, and the one with Dennis was awesome. Dennis Mosley Williams, full disclosure,
with Josh
Dennis
Spector.
Dennis. I've worked with Dennis for years. Was great. And then the last one, I should have had my Andrew, one of my triplet boys watch because he's into soccer. The two guys that you had talking about the
Jason
European,
Buck and Roger Mitchell, who got into like the economics of teams and the macro environment for all of it, and then just the craziness of both of their lives and careers because it's just super fun. Super fun.
So the irony of all this is that was the question I was going to ask you. Was ask Matt where he keeps the whole archive. Because I remember when I first got to know you, I don't know if you told me about it or sent me the article or I found it on my own, but I was so curious and captivated by this idea of this personal archive. And so I wanted to dive into that. That was my final question for you, was how that all worked, which you just elegantly explained. It's like
more
you knew it was
people,
coming.
it's like I knew it was coming. I genuinely believe that if you make a habit out of collecting your people, your ideas, your reflections on stuff, and you store it somewhere, just to help you with recall, and not specifically not a second brain, not something I don't hate, strong word. I don't feel good about, like, and this is, I love the Jim O'Shaughnessy's new book. I don't know if you've seen it yet.
I haven't, I heard about it, but I haven't seen it. I haven't read it yet.
It's beautiful. You should actually order it just to have a physical copy in your house. I think like your kids should look, touch, and feel this book because it's so easy to go through. It's 2 ideas, but they're great. That would be a perfect idea of like the Tiago Forte stuff and whatever, where here's 2 thoughts from a person. I can't tell you how many posts like Jim's inspired by sharing these quotes online. So now having them in a book, it's like if ever I'm like, I'm not sure what I want to write about today, or I need something to like just jumpstart my brain, kickstart my heart, open up that book, read a quote, and you'll be like, oh man, I want to have a complete thought around this idea. And that's the one layer of separation here. And it goes back to the original idea of, are you consuming or are you creating? If you're just consuming the quote, you're not taking the time to actually reflect on it yourself and be like, this is what this stirred inside of me. That exercise for the last now 7 years in public, the most valuable thing that I've done for myself, and to now be able to tracking it via YouTube and via the podcast and saying, let's just show how it happens in real time, how I get it from other people. Cause I'll go out with my wife to eat pizza at the bar down the street, and like some person will say something to me and she'll look at me and be like, oh, there's a post. I'll be like, yeah, it's going in the phone right now. Got to think about that on Saturday morning.
Morgan Housel's like that for me. I'm sure he's like that for a lot of people, but like I've even got a book project I'm working on based on him and his thoughts and quotes, and that actually Brian Portnoy helped give me some direction on, and so is Carl Richards. So
great stuff.
Pretty fortunate to have.
You need those
like
reflections. You got to build that muscle. So we all look forward to the book, Paul. No pressure.
No pressure. Thanks. Well, listen, I didn't know how this was going to turn out, but maybe it was, when I look back at like the last 50 minutes that we've been talking, maybe the audience, you've learned a little bit more or inside baseball on how 2 advisors think and work and go about their business. But this has been really cool. Like I said, it's totally different than approach than I've done with any other show in the almost 4.5 years I've had the emotional balance sheet now. So, but I think the one takeaway for me is dig into that personal archive. So
store those reflections, man. Got to build up that emotional balance sheet, you know?
That's right.
Thoughts and ideas. Get them all on paper. I love it. Thanks so much for having me, Paul.
Yeah, Matt Zeigler, thank you so much for being here. And the true test will be what Madison thought of this episode when it comes out.
Make sure you leave a comment or something, Madison. I need this proof in the pudding. And if you turn on me, I got options.
You got a wolf?
I got options. There's other kids. You can lose pole position real fast. But you can also cement this pole position. No pressure for you either.
No. All right, Matt. I will catch up with you soon. Thanks again.
Thanks, Paul. See you soon.
I think one of the most important pieces to take away from our conversation, if you're interested, is this personal archive project that Matt was talking about. It's something that I've tried to do over the course of my career as an advisor, probably more so over the last 3 or 4. And I think that's maybe of having kids the ages that I do and being able to share things with them from a life planning, life transition standpoint. But it's also things that I try to share with the families I work with at TAMA. I think the other, I hope, interesting point that you walk away with is the value conversation of what we do as an advisors that Matt and I talked about. It's not something that's ever going to be quantifiable. And that may be a good thing. And he gave lots of great examples of how he relates to people at very different ages and life stages about what it is that we do as advisors. I know the one example he gave of being a general practitioner doctor, and how we can't perform heart surgery, we can't, fix a cancer diagnosis, but we know people, we can help you get to the right place. And I think that's where I mentioned being that, depending on your favorite sport, whether it's your quarterback in football, your point guard in basketball, or your center in hockey, that's how I feel like I relate to the people that I work with and help support the families, that I try to be that centerpiece. And when life hits the fan, as I called it, I'm there to help protect, guide, advise, and just be there as a human being with some empathy when life transitions occur. Now that you've made it to the end of another great conversation, are you looking for more? If so, head over to tamacapital.com, where you will find all of our conversations. Use the search feature to find the topic or guest you would love to learn more about. Also, don't forget to make someone else's day by sharing our show. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.